fra Miro.
But Miro will say something more and about his experience and how he originates from this parish. So Father Miro, please take the floor.
Hvala Isus i Marija.
Praise be Jesus and Mary.
Sve vas lijepo pozdravljam.
I greet you all. It is so nice to see you here today at this place. And I'm glad and thanks be to God that today the weather is a little bit more comfortable, that we can even sit in the sun, that we can be closer to one another. I thank Father Zvonimir who gave me possibility to be able to speak to you, not with some sort of lecture, but with my experience and with something that in good amount has changed my entire life and the course of my living. It is something that I never thought about, something that I never hoped for, something that I haven't even thought about, that one day I would be a Franciscan, that one day I would be a priest. And all of that has changed. 1981. So this morning, when you started this encounter, this place of prayer, this place of communion, in these 4 days, that was Apparition Hill, you were at a place where indeed heaven touched earth. I was born in this place. I was born in the hamlet of the village, just below the Apparition Hill, and this is where I was raised. I grew up there. It was 4 children, family. My father, my mom, my grandfather was alive. One of the visionaries, Ivan Dragičević, and I, for 8 years, we were in the same grade. We shared the time as we walked from the home back to school, and the school was just on this side of the church. And we would also be together. When we would walk back, we always walked. It was not possible to do anything else. We grew up together. So we spent lots of time together. Just like the other visionaries, Vicka, Ivanka, Maria, Mirjana. Only Jakov, he was a little bit younger than we were, so he wasn't part of our team, and we didn't know him quite well. What I said at the beginning is that everything changed. Everything changed in my life in 1981, on June 24th. It was on that day we as children were enjoying a free day. It would be a rare free day, because what we would be engaged and what our families did was to grow tobacco and to grow wines. So we would spend our time every single day, and as children we learned to wake up quite early, sometimes at 4 o'clock, sometimes very often 4:30, and sometimes 5 o'clock, depending on when it was needed. And we would go to pick up tobacco leaves. We would bring tobacco leaves at home, and then tobacco was stringed, and then it was dried, and the process that followed towards the final product. So there were just rare moments when we had some free time. And this was the day, June 24th, the day when we were celebrating the feast of St. John the Baptist. And it was just a little bit free time, because on that day we didn't work, it was a feast day.
dečkići
And so we boys,
igrati loptu.
we would play soccer.
I bili smo točno tamo gdje se parkiraju
And we were exactly at the spot where the buses are parked below the Apparition Hill on the way to Cenacolo.
imali jedan mali prostor
We would have a little space, a little meadow there,
gdje smo igrali zajedno loptu.
and we were playing football there.
Sjećam se vrlo dobro toga
And I remember that day
kad smo završili s tim,
when we would
mi smo pošli
finish the work, we were going home.
i kad smo izišli na onu
And so we came out to the road leading to Cenacolo community. We met Mirjana, Ivanka, and Milka.
to je Marijina sestra.
This was Maria's sister.
Njih sreli smo i
Little bit afterwards, we met Vicka.
nitko nije mogao sanjati
Nobody could have imagined, nobody could have thought or presumed
što bi se ili što će se dogoditi.
what was going to happen just half an hour afterwards.
Naime, kad sam za jedno pola sata izišao iz
In just half an hour, when I left my home,
primijetio
I could notice outside Vicka's house
narod, odnosno
that some people gathered,
i pretpostavio sam da se
and I presumed that something happened,
jer obično tako je bilo.
because usually that would be the case. If something happens, people gather in the middle of the village, and they would be talking about that.
Rodbina,
Vicka and I were relatives, we were cousins.
onda sam prišao i vidio nju.
So I came to Vicka and I could see her completely excited. I asked her, Vicka, what happened?
Kad mi ona rekla, vidjeli smo
Then she told me, we saw Our Lady,
blokirao.
and I was completely blocked.
Jednostavno sam
I was frozen.
zanijemio, ja više
I wasn't able to say a word.
ni izustiti, ništa, ni razmišljati. Samo sam gledao.
I was just looking at her.
Gledao sam i onako slušao
I was listening to what the other people were saying to them.
Oni su uporno tvrdili
And they kept saying that they saw Our Lady.
bio u tom trenutku toliko
So in that moment I was so blocked, and I wasn't able.
sam imao doticaja.
I didn't have any connection with, not that I didn't have any connection with the faith or religion, but none of us really knew anything about Lourdes or Fatima.
Ili ako su to govorili nama svećenici ili časne sestre na vjeronauku, ona kako kaže jedan moj subrat da smo mi savršeno stvoreni.
We were perfectly created.
Odmah izađe. Takvi su mladi.
That is the young people very often.
Međutim, ta večer je bila
That night
šutnje, rekao bih. Moji su
was the night of silence.
šta se dogodilo,
My parents found out what happened. I came home, everyone was silent, nobody was talking. Maybe just father and mother said few words among themselves, but all of us, we were just looking at one another. We were silent, and we reflected on what we heard,
jer je to bilo nevjerojatno.
because this all seemed quite impossible, something extraordinary, something completely new in our lives.
I ta noć je, ja barem mogu
So that night, at least I could say that about me. That night has changed the course of my human journey.
naime. Kao dijete ja sam sanjao i razmišljao
As a child, I dreamt about that.
završiti srednju školu. Fakultet se tada
To
pripremio.
complete high school, we didn't have instruments to go to university back in those days. I thought when I finished the school,
Kao i mnogi iz moga sela,
then many from my village would go to Germany or go to Switzerland or go to Austria,
jer su oni vraćajući se svako ljeto
because as they were returning every summer, they would share the stories
u Njemačkoj.
about the life in Germany,
Kako se tamo dobro živi,
how the life is really good there,
tamo ima svega,
how there are many things available there.
život u izobilju. I kao dijete razmišljao sam o
And there's life in abundance, and as a child, I thought about that. I thought in that way,
da će moj put i
and I thought that my life and my journey one day
pobjegnemo do
would be finally to escape from the vineyard, to escape from this misery and from everything that I was looking and I could notice.
a moji roditelji su
And my parents
itekako dobro podnosili.
knew all of that and were coping with that quite well. But that night was a crucial night.
znam je li to bio strah.
I don't know if it was fear. I don't know what it was.
Ja sam
But
tu noć sanjao jedan san.
that night I had a dream.
U tom mome snu
In a dream,
ja sam se nalazio sam
I was all
u
alone.
jednoj barci.
I was in a boat. I was at a lake.
Zašto barka, zašto?
Why boat? Why lake? I have no idea.
Jer u nas ovdje vode nije bilo.
Here we didn't have any water.
Ali je to u tome snu bilo
But in that dream, everything seemed to be so realistic.
Bilo je ovako lijepo, mirno vrijeme.
And it seemed to be nice. Good weather. It wasn't windy at all.
U jednom trenutku je zapuhao tako
But at one moment it started to be such a strong wind. And the boat was taken with me, and the boat was the other way round.
Našao sam se u tome trenutku
So I happened to be in that moment
ko nisam znao
in the water, even though I didn't know how to swim.
bio sam šok, strah. I kako
I
sam
experienced
ostala je samo
fear.
ovaj dio
And as I sank,
desne ruke.
just part of my right hand was there above the
U
water.
tom trenutku kad se i to skoro
And in that
dogodilo,
moment, when that
dolazi
happened,
jedna ruka s neba,
a hand came from heaven,
moju ruku izvlači.
grabbed my hand and pulled me out of the
U
water.
toj ruci ja vidim i prepoznajem blaženu djevicu.
At that moment, I heard, I could see the Blessed Virgin Mary. That's when I woke up.
Mjesto sam se probudio.
I feel so bad that I got awake, that I was awake, but on the other hand, I was glad that I was awake because I was able to see
U svom krevetu
that I was all good in my bed, nothing happened.
i taj san i taj događaj, puno sam puta o njemu
That dream, that event, I thought about that many times. I pondered on that. I wanted to see what is it that really happened in that night.
promijenio.
But that dream has changed the course of my journey completely.
Za 2 mjeseca,
In 2 months' time,
kad je Frajozo Zlovko
when Father Jozo was taken away
odavde iz župne kuće,
here from the parish house, when he was accused
evanđelje,
because he was preaching the gospel,
40
he spoke about 40 days and 40 years of being in prison, which was referring to the communism regime. So I met
sjemenište.
Ivan, and Ivan was saying that he was going to the seminary.
Gledam ga,
And I stood up and I was looking, and I said, okay, I will go too.
i nisam ja te godine otišao.
That year I didn't go.
Već 81. godine.
It was already 1981.
Otišao sam godinu poslije 82. godine za
In 1982,
svoju formaciju
I went,
u našim kućama odgoja u Dubrovniku, zatim na Humcu kao
and then my formation started there. I was a novice in Humac,
i Bolonja.
and then I went to Magaska in Bologna.
92. i prije
And I ended up in 1992, and exactly 33 years ago, on 2nd of August 1992, during the time of the war,
meni za leđa
I was here in the church.
festivala mladih
During the time of the youth festival, my first Holy Mass was celebrated here.
Dakle, taj događaj,
So this event,
kojem ja nisam tada puno razmišljao,
the event that I didn't think
kad
about,
smo mi započeli, dakle, ta noć
but
prošla,
when we started,
sutra je bilo normalno sve.
everything was normal. To get up at 4 o'clock, Father was calling me, my mother was calling me, they were saying yes.
Nikoga nije vidio, niti isko isto.
Nobody saw anyone, nobody communicated with anyone,
Pitao šta se sinoć
or nobody asked what happened the night before. Nobody said anything like about that. Sometimes in the afternoon,
5:30, 6 sati,
5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, while we were at home, while we were still working around tobacco, my grandfather came and he said, okay, Our Lady again appeared. And we were like the apostles when
lađe i
they left the boat
očeva i pošli
of their fathers and when they followed Jesus.
i počeli trčati.
We rejected that and we started running along the hill that we knew so much.
Gdje ste vi bili jutros? Ja sam tu provodio
Where you were this morning, I spent hours and hours there.
zajedništva. Nije bilo drugog nekog mjesta mjesta za igru.
It wasn't, we didn't have any other place, but we were doing that in the hill, and many times we were there
Gdje se danas nalazi onaj Gospin kip, odnosno
where the statue of Our Lady is, where Our Lady appeared.
išli prema brdu,
And so while we walked towards the hill,
ali tu su nam počeli govoriti prve
the
snove
visionaries were there.
pred njihom.
It was the first encounter with them, with Our Lady.
20
And then I remember that on that 26th of June, when everything
svakodnevnom onom radu
was in our daily work, everything was reserved for that afternoon and for the expectation of what was going to happen.
proveli smo cijelo poslijepodne zajedno.
We spent the entire afternoon together. We spent time together.
Molili, pjevali, razgovarali.
We spoke, we talked, everything we did before.
I sjećam se tog trenutka kad smo pošli prema
And I remember the moment when we went to the Apparition Hill.
ispod,
We were the road before,
trenutku stojeći kod Ivana, vidioca, on mi
and standing close to Ivan the Visionary, he said, "There is a light."
vidim samo ono drveće i ono kamenje, ne vidim ništa drugo. Ja njemu kažem, kojeg
And I told him, "What light? I only saw the rocks." He said, "That is the light."
me gleda i čudi se kako ja ne vidim. Ja njega gledam i čudim se kako mi on govori da vidi.
And I was astonished how come that he says that he sees something.
Krenuli trčeći ispod brda do onog
Then we were running towards the hill, towards the place where the statue of Our Lady is.
5 minuta prileti. Jer smo
It was just 5 minutes.
dobro obučeni po tome kamenu. I kad smo došli gore,
And when we came up,
u jednom trenutku oni su
in
kleknuli.
a moment, they knelt down and they started to pray.
Počeli smo i mi zajedno s njima moliti.
We started to pray too.
Promatram ih, gledam okolo.
I was looking at them and I couldn't see anything.
Bilo sada i nešto još čudnije. U jednom trenutku oni
It was even more strange. At one moment they stopped praying.
njihov pogled ide u jednu točku.
There
Ako je god koje visine,
we're looking at one spot, each one of them at the same spot. The taller ones, I could just see that Jakob was holding his hand very up because he was little.
gledam u tom pravcu.
I was looking in that direction and I could not see anything.
Gledam njih, vidim da
I was looking at them and I could see that their lips were moving.
vidim da pričaju,
I could see that they were talking together,
ništa ne čuju.
but I wasn't able to hear anything.
I sve je to tako trajalo jedno
All of that lasted for about 15-20 minutes maybe.
Tako da mi je to bilo još nešto što nisam mogao.
This was something that I couldn't understand.
Što se točno u tom trenutku.
I wasn't able to understand what was happening in those moments.
I kad je sve završilo,
Everything was over.
u jednom trenutku oni su
In just one moment they said, "She's gone."
ja sam se nakon za sebe pitao tko. Jer nikoga,
I wondered who, because I couldn't see anyone.
oni su se prekrstili,
They made the sign of the cross
razgovarali.
and they started to talk again with us.
I bilo je to prekrasan trenutak,
It's a beautiful
a
moment.
opet nešto
And again,
što ne možeš dovoljno
it was something that you were not able to understand.
Danas se promijenio naš
From that day on, our daily rhythm has changed
prije podne
completely. Before the noon, we were going to work, and it was reserved for prayer, for the encounters, for going to the Apparition Hill.
i sve je to
And all of that was going
nekoliko dana
on for a couple of days
došla zapovijed
until the commandment came and the decision from the government back in those days that we were not able to go to the hill.
cijelo brdo
They blocked the entire hill
se moglo ići.
and nobody was able to go.
Onda smo mi išli ispod
Then
kuća u polje.
we would go below the houses into the fields. That is where the apparitions were. That is where we would meet together.
A onda su rekli ne može ni,
And then they would say, "No, no, that's not even allowed.
ako ćete moliti,
If you want to pray,
idite molite.
you need to go and pray in the church."
I onda su došli u crkvu,
Then they went to the church,
je tu počelo ukazanje,
and that is where
ovaj način,
the apparition started,
dnevni
this daily way.
postao. Ja sam bio, rekao sam, tu jednu godinu, onda
So I was there for a year, and then when the school started, we would go to the school. We would go in the afternoon. It was so difficult to follow these things, but every day when we were able, we would come here. If we were not able to come to the Holy Mass, at least we would say 7 Our Fathers, Hail Marys and Glory Bees. That was the rhythm. And then in 1982, I went to the seminary. I went quite far. I was far away, but always I was present there.
ono što je dakle bio moja nekakva, nazovimo je, nije sumnja, nego nekakav taj...
There were some doubts that I had, maybe some things that I couldn't understand, and all of that. Very quickly I was able to understand, as I was observing them, the visionaries, that something really was happening, because their life was changed.
U drugome nekom smjeru okrenuo ka dobrome, ka više onom duhovnome.
Their life turned towards the spiritual.
Učvrstilo da doista ono što se događa,
And indeed, what was happening in all of these people.
ono što Isus kaže u
What
Svetom
Jesus said in the Holy Scripture,
su blaženi oni koji ne vide,
that blessed are those who don't believe, who believe without seeing.
osobno proživio, odnosno ono što sam osobno osjetio i ono što je
This is what I experienced myself. This was the beginning,
ovoga vremena,
the time
onih događanja koja su
of all of the events, of everything that happened afterwards,
44
in all of these 44 years and even more at this place.
Ono što sam htio samo još naglasiti danas,
What I wanted to emphasize today
ona važnost
is the importance
dogodilo.
of what happened.
Rekao sam vam da sam puno puta razmišljao
I told you that many times I thought about priests about my dream.
doista bio taj događaj koji je
Was the dream the event that really did that? And I'm convinced it was. But I thought about that many times.
sebe pitao,
Many times I would ask myself, did I hear well?
ja dobro odlučio,
Did I make the right decision? Did I do the right
ja
decision?
izabrao baš ovaj put.
Is this the journey that I chose? Was this that I really needed?
Kako ljudi, svaki pa tako i svećenik, često zna upasti u određene kušnje, nedoumice
And how many times you can be in different doubts, in questions,
i sve te druge stvari.
in some sort of reflections and all the other things.
Znate kako sam ja rješavao te stvari?
Do you know how I would deal with that?
Došao bi ovdje u
I
Međugorje,
would come here to Medjugorje, I would just sit to in confessional,
i sve bilo jasno.
and everything would be clear for me there.
Sad ću vam ispričati samo to jedno
Now I just want to share one experience with you.
pitanju. Jedan moj subrat dolazi isto sa svojim problemima
A brother came
i on mi govori o svojim
with the problems and he spoke about the difficulties, about the doubts.
Ja njemu kažem, znaš kako ja to rješavam? Ja odem u Međugorje, u ispovjedonicu i tu se sve riješi.
I go to Medjugorje at the confessional and everything is resolved there. He was looking at me.
A nisam baš možda izgledao.
He said maybe I didn't seem convincing.
Sjedim ja u svojoj župi,
I was sitting in my parish.
Evropsko prvenstvo u nogometu. I gledam ja utakmicu, ne znam tko
It was the European Championship and I was watching a game.
isto ovako festival mladih.
It was a youth festival.
Ulazi taj moj subrat,
And so my brother came and he hugged me.
šta ti je, velim ja.
And I said, what's happening?
Kaže on, meni imao spravu.
He said, you are right.
Bio sam danas u Međugorju,
I went to Medjugorje today during the time of the youth festival.
sata u ispovjedonici.
I sat for 3 hours in the confessionals. And you were right.
Sve se kaže posložilo.
Everything sat at its own place.
Da je to tako.
I was glad that this was like that.
Da još nekome.
It wasn't just my case, but it was for somebody else too.
Samo htio naglasiti možda
And what I would like to emphasize as something also important
ovdje u bezbroj svojih poruka
here in many of the messages, Our Lady is inviting us to prayer.
bezbroj puta ponovila dječice, molite molite.
She would say many times, "Dear children, pray, pray, pray."
Ono što vam danas mogu posvjedočiti jest to
What I can witness to you is that I grew up in a family,
gdje se doslovno svaki dan,
in a family where each day we would pray.
nakon napornog rada koji se završio u polju, mi bismo
After the work in the fields, we would sit in our homes, in our families,
oko našega obiteljskoga
family communion around our table, where we would talk and we would eat and we would pray.
mjesto okupljanja. Mi smo svaki
The table was the place where we gathered every day in the evening.
koji je predvodio molitvu,
My grandfather, who was leading us in prayer, we would say the Angelus.
najprije anđeo Gospodnji,
First we would say the Angel of the Lord, and then some 15-20 minutes we would spend in prayer afterwards.
djetetu, iskreno vam mogu reći, je pomalo
For me as a child, I was quite annoyed with that sometimes.
slagao previše s tim.
I didn't
Nisam
spend
mogao dovoljno razumjeti.
pay too much attention, and I was not able to understand that quite well. What does it mean?
I koja je vrijednost toga?
What is the value of that?
Znali smo nekada, ne baš
Sometimes
hrabrosti, pa smo znali nekada reći djedu,
we could even say to our grandfather, "Please, you don't have to say to everything. We have to go."
on bi uvijek produžio kad bismo
He would always
ostali ga više pitati.
even make the prayer appear to be longer, so we stopped asking him to put it shorter. I could not understand that, but I understand that now.
Razumijem vrlo dobro i to je
I understand quite well.
ste vi prije 44 godine prošli
So if you 44 years ago were to go at the base of the Apparition Hill or Cross Mountain,
dio
any part
selo naše župe, vi ste mogli ispred kuća čuti
outside homes, you could only hear the sound of prayer.
obitelji su bile na okupu i
Families were gathered, and every family
molila zajedno.
in the evening would be praying together.
Izići vani, nisam se mogao
I wasn't able to come out.
družiti, nisam mogao ništa
I wasn't able to do anything.
prije nego li se rekne molitva.
Prayer would be said.
Zajednička molitva, onda se
Once the prayer is said, you can go.
vani, možeš prošetati, možeš se družiti s prijateljima i ne znam ni. Ali prije svega je bila važna
But above all, it was important to really use the family prayer.
smo mi ovdje itekako dobro osjetili, proživjeli, doživjeli.
We experienced that, and this is continuous.
Međugorje se nastavlja i dalje.
In MEĐUGORJE, it continues.
Mole i domaći, župljani, ali najviše
Parishioners pray, but pilgrims are praying, pilgrims who are walking in the streets of our village.
skupina, pojedinac, nosi krunicu u ruci, slobodno
Every individual prays.
mu ne brani. I mnogi su to upravo otkrili ovdje, tu vrijednost molitve. Ono što bi vama danas
Here,
stavio na srce,
they would discover
znači vama poštovani.
the value of importance, something that I would put
Vi se
there.
nalazite na ovom mjestu.
You are here.
Palo mi je malo prije na
You are at this
pamet prije nego
place.
što dođi ovdje. Onaj Jakovljev san.
Dream that Jacob had when Jacob dreamt about the stairway and the angels going up and down.
Vrata nebeska.
This is the house of the Lord. This is the gate of heaven.
Nalazite ovdje. I kako kaže geslo ovogodišnjega susreta mladih,
And the gesture says, "Let us go to the house of the Lord." You are here today.
u domu.
You are here in the house of the Lord.
Mladi,
You young people,
vi ste danas kod kuće.
you are at home today.
Danas u očevoj kući, vi ste danas u domu.
You are in the house of the Lord.
Ovdje,
You are
na
here,
vratima nebeskim.
here, outside the gate of heaven, and the one that gathers us here, the one that gathers us for more than 44 years.
Ona nas okuplja kao majka.
She gathers us as a mother.
Važno.
That is why it is so important. What was read by Father Zvonimir in the beginning, there is importance and there is the role of a mother.
Dragi mladi, vi
Dear young people,
imate oči, razumijete,
You see
imate pamet.
and you can understand,
Možete dovoljno shvatiti
and you can understand
koja
quite
je
well
danas najveća
what
i
is the greatest
najžešći udar
attack in the world, it is the attack on a woman.
Žena je danas najugroženija.
Woman today is the one that is in the biggest danger.
Se danas želi do kraja obezvrijediti.
They want to really destroy the value of a woman today. And there is a big importance of a mother that is immense in each family. This is what I was able to feel in my family, and I believe many other.
Možda je neko nešto doživio drugačije, ali uloga majke je ona
But the role of a mother
koja okuplja, koja potiče,
is the one who gathers,
koja daje sve ono
the
što,
one that gives.
ali jednako tako zna biti i pomalo žestoka u nekim trenucima.
But it is also something that, she can show the power in different moments. That is why Mother today is inviting us that we try, not that we try, but that we bring
Tu vrijednost molitve,
this value of prayer in our homes.
jer je to ona snaga koja
Because it is the power
naš život i učvršćuje.
that nurtures our life and strengthens our faith.
Kad su pitali
The visionary said when they asked Our Lady, why MEĐUGORJE, why here?
kaže, ovaj narod ima vjere.
These people have faith.
Ovaj narod ima vjere.
These people have faith.
Koji dođu ovdje,
And all of the pilgrims who come here, they will be able to learn about the faith.
razumjeti što
They will be able to understand. What does that mean?
vi danas koji dolazite u ovom vremenu teško možete
Maybe you who come in this time, it's difficult for you to understand. 1981.
teško razumjeti.
It is difficult to understand. There are few pilgrims
Su te godine dolazili ovdje, osim toga,
who were coming here except for those local ones.
oni znaju što je bilo,
They know what happened.
to izgledalo.
They know how it looked
Ono
like.
što su oni mogli osjetiti,
But what they were able to feel is the power and the strength of faith.
nas Gospa bezbroj puta
That is why Our Lady on so many occasions is inviting us to that. Dear children, pray. Pray, pray, pray.
jer kroz molitvu ćete
Because in prayer
snagu
you will be able to discover peace.
Evo, želim vam doista danas ovdje i ne samo
And here today I wish for you, not in just these days,
da ste u domu,
that you feel that you are in the house of the Lord.
da su ovo vrata nebeska,
That you may feel that these are the gates of heaven, the gates that are opening,
prostor vašega srca i ona nova
the
obzora
space of your heart and the new horizons of your life, that these are the doors through which you will enter
radosna srca
and go
i srca
with joyful hearts
na
and with the hearts full of peace. Amen.
Hvala vam.
Thank you.